This is the digital channel of the General Overseas Service of All India Radio. I am Manoj Mainkar, and in the next half hour, I'll bring to you news updates from India and around the world, awareness videos on coronavirus by Government of India, and a lot more. We'll begin with the news updates.
This is the General Overseas Service of All India Radio. Namaskar. The news snippets. Total recoveries from SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus in India has crossed the 3 million mark. 66,659 people recovered from COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. Total recoveries are 30,37,151. The recovery rate is now 77.15%. Total tests conducted for COVID-19 in the country has gone beyond 45 million or 4.5 crore. In the past 24 hours, 11,69,765 tests were conducted. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in his address to the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum, has said that development should be human-oriented. The COVID-19 pandemic has tested our resilience, our economies and our health systems. Mr. Modi said India has the capacity to face the challenges posed by COVID-19. He said today India has emerged as one of the largest PPE kit producers and exporter of the world. India scaled up its health facilities in record time during the pandemic. India's Atmanirbhar or self-reliance campaign is to make its aspirational population vocal about local. Indian products are second to none, Prime Minister said. India has opened up various sectors for investment: coal, defence, atomic energy, space, mining, etc. are areas which would offer wonderful opportunities to the investors, Mr. Modi said. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar will be attending the meeting of the SCO foreign ministers on 10th September in Moscow. He will hold talks with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. UN experts have voiced deep concerns over Hong Kong security laws. UN experts say the laws are being used by China to prosecute activists. The experts also said that the laws breach international legal obligations. Much more than 1.2 million people could have been infected by COVID-19 in Africa. Less testing and non-reporting of cases is a worrying factor. Experts warn that peak is yet to hit the continent. Healthcare professionals fear inadequate medical facilities would not be able to manage the pandemic. Afghan government negotiators are in Qatar for the long-delayed talks with the Taliban. The talks are expected to discuss the peace process in the country. And that is the end of the news snippets. Every voyage is inspired by a natural human longing of people to see and explore a new world. Travelers in ancient days used to get information about new places from merchant groups. What such visitors recorded later revealed to us details of our ancient history. Much of our knowledge of ancient and medieval Indian history comes from the accounts of foreigners who as pilgrims, travelers and traders crossed the seas and difficult land routes to reach India. In their writings on their observations and experiences of a country new and strange to them, they left valuable contributions to the historical understanding of early Indian society. In our program Travelogue, we bring to you some of the foreign travelers' account of India and their understanding of Indian culture and civilization.
Across the times and civilizational boundaries, there have been many a natural curiosity amongst people who want to know about the world beyond their own natural habitat. From a very early time, the lure of unknown, mystical and fabulous lands have led many people from far-off regions to traverse the unknown frontiers and come to India. Some of them perhaps came here in search of some specific goals, But after coming here, almost all of them were overawed by the bountiful land, its natural resources, the amazing people of this wonderful part of the world, the home to one of the most ancient civilizations, our own India, that is Bharat.
Among the early foreign visitors to India who have left a written account of their first-hand experience of this wonderland, the accounts of the Arab travelers forms an interesting genre of travel writings. As a nomadic tribe as well as itinerant merchants, the Arabs had been avid travelers from a very early time. After the coming of Islam in Arabia in the 7th century of the Common Era, the itinerant zeal of its followers found its reflection in the famous Hadith, or one of the sayings of the Prophet, who urged the Muslims to go even unto China in order to acquire ilm, or knowledge.
By far the most celebrated chroniclers among the early Arab travelers to India is Al-Masudi, the famous geographer and historian who is hailed as the Herodotus of the Arabs. He was the first Arab writer to combine history and scientific geography in his works. Masudi was a prolific writer and is said to have authored more than 34 books. The majority of his writings include works on Islamic beliefs and sects, and one even about various kinds of poisons.
Masudi was born before 893 CE in Baghdad, in Iraq. His full name was Abul Hasan Ali ibn al-Hussein al-Masudi. Like many of his countrymen, Masudi was an avid wanderer. His travels extended to Syria, Iran, Armenia, the shores of the Caspian Sea, the Indus Valley, Sri Lanka, Oman, and the east coast of Africa, as far south as Zanzibar and possibly to Madagascar. He says of himself that he traveled so far to the west, up to Morocco and Spain, that he forgot the east, and so far to the east, up to China, that he forgot the west. After spending his youth visiting various distant lands, in about 947 CE, he finally selected Al-Fustat, now part of Cairo. He died here probably in September 956 CE.
Ibn Khaldun, the great 14th century Arab philosopher of history, describes Masudi as an imam, literally a leader for all historians. Unfortunately, most of Masudi's writings have been lost, but whatever survive is sufficient to place him amongst the most foremost of intellectuals of his time. His major work was Akbar-uz-Zaman, or The History of Time. This work, in 30 volumes, was an encyclopedic world history, taking into account not only the political history but also many facets of human knowledge and activity.
Masudi followed it with another work, Kitab al-Awsat, or Book of the Average, variously described as a supplement to or an abridgment of his earlier magnum opus, Akhbar al-Zaman. Later, Masudi combined the two works in less detail and rewrote them in a single book. His new work bore a fanciful title, Muruj-uz-Zahab wa Madin al-Zawahir, or The Meadows of Gold and Mines of Gems.
Though claimed as an abridgment, Muruj-uz-Zahab is still a substantial work with 132 chapters. The first half of this work starts with a history of the creation of the world and is followed by chapters describing the history, geography, social life and religious customs of non-Islamic lands such as Rome, Greece and India. One full chapter is devoted to an abridged account of the Hindus, their opinions, the origins of their kings and their lives, also their usage in holy service.
In his introduction, Masudi lists more than 80 earlier historical works that he consulted to write his account, but more importantly, he underscores the importance of his own travels in pursuit of first-hand knowledge.
He writes, "The object of these journeys has been to satisfy our thirst for knowledge and to learn the peculiarities of the various nations and parts of the world, by witnessing them and the state of foreign countries. By seeing them in this way, we travelled to Al-Hind, that is, India."
About India, Masudi writes,
India, Arz al-Hind, is a vast country extending over sea and land and mountains. It borders on the country of Zabaz or Java, which is the kingdom of the Maharaj, the king of the islands, whose dominions separate India and China, but are considered as part of India. India extends on the side of the mountains to Khurasan and Sindh, as far as Tibet. There prevails a great difference of language and religion in these kingdoms, and they are frequently at war with each other. The most of them believe in the metempsychosis or the transmigration of the soul. The Hindus are distinct from all other black people as the Zanjis, the Damadams, and others in point of intellect, government, philosophy, strength of constitution, and purity of color.
Masudi's vast knowledge is evidenced in his formidable skill of comparing and analyzing various countries and regions of which he had acquired first-hand knowledge. Thus, he compares India and Italy and calls Rome as Benares on the river Tiber. He writes,
India may be compared in its geographical position and character with Italy. The Italians, like the Hindus, are buried under the ruins of their former grandeur and vegetate in unmanly occupation in the plundered temples of their Benares on the Tiber.
Masudi gives an interesting account of the river Ganga, which he calls Ginjis. He writes,
The Ganges, or Ginjis, is a large river in India. It rises in the mountains of the most remote parts of India, towards China, not far from the Turkish frontier, and falls after a course of 400 farsangs into the Abyssinian Sea, the Bahr al-Habshi, on the coast of India.
About the inhabitants of India, Masudi has made very interesting observations. At one place, he writes about their abstinence from liquor.
The Hindus abstain from spirituous liquor, al-sharab, and censure those who consume it, not because their religion forbids it, but in the dread of its clouding their reason and depriving them of its powers. If it can be proved of one of their kings that he has drunk wine, he forfeits the crown, for he is not considered to be able to rule and govern the empire if his mind is affected.
Masudi visited the western Indian port town of Khambat in about 915 CE, and it is from him that we come to know this town was famous for its laced shoes, which bore its name Al-Na'al, Al-Kanbayata, and were made in this and the neighboring towns. About the geographical features of Khambat, Masudi writes,
The above-mentioned town is situated on an estuary which is as wide as the Nile, or like the Tigris and Euphrates. On the banks of the estuary one sees towns, villas, cultivation, gardens, palms, coconut trees, guinea fowls, parrots and other Indian birds. The city of Kambaya is 2 days or less distant from the mouth of this estuary. The ebb is so marked in this estuary that the sand lays quite bare, and only in the middle of the bed remains a little water.
Masudi also gives a graphic description of Kashmir.
Kashmir forms a powerful kingdom which comprises from 60 to 70,000 towns and villages, and his territory is unapproachable excepting from one side, so that he can shut up the whole of his dominions with one gate. For it is surrounded by mountains of such height that neither men nor wild animals can climb over them, and they are only accessible to birds. Where there are no mountains, there are inaccessible valleys, trees, jungles, and rivers which defend the place by their rapidity. The natural fortifications of this country is well known as Khorasan and other provinces, and it is one of the most wonderful things in the world.
Through Masudi's pen, we also come to know about the secular outlook of the Hindu rulers of India who protected all minority communities, including the followers of Islam. He writes,
Neither in India al-Hind nor in Sindh al-Sindh is there a sovereign who disturbs the peace of the Muslims in their own country. Islam is therefore flourishing there. The mosques and jamis for Muslim worship are large and splendid. Their kings are long-lived and reign 40, 50 and more years. And the Muslim subjects believe that the length of the life of a sovereign depends upon his justice and the respect paid to the Muslims.
Like many other foreign visitors to India, Masudi too was enamored by the sight of Indian elephants.
They are not only used for war, but for many other purposes, as for carrying burdens, drawing carriages, threshing rice, and other sorts of grain, akwat, as oxen tread out corn on a floor.
Masoodi refers to Indian rulers as the king of wisdom and of elephants. The mastery of Indian rulers to deploy elephants in war gave them a definite edge over their rivals. Masoodi writes,
If an elephant is spirited, pugnacious, and brave, a rider sits on his back, and he has a fortal or kartal, which is a kind of sword, in his trunk. The trunk is covered with mail and iron, and the rest of his body is protected by an armor of iron and leather. Such an elephant is surrounded by 500 men who protect him from behind. An elephant thus equipped keeps his ground against 6,000 horsemen. He advances, retires, goes round, and makes the military evolutions like a horse with a rider on his back. These are the maneuvers of the elephants of the Hindus in all their wars.
According to Masoodi, the Indian rulers ranked amongst top 5 rulers of the world. For, he declares,
It was acknowledged amongst the Khosraus or kings that wisdom comes from India.
Elsewhere he writes,
The king of India, which has with us the name of the kingdom of wisdom, for the Hindus have invented philosophy.
About the conduct of the Indian kings, Masoodi records,
No king can succeed to the throne in India before he is 40 years of age. Nor does their sovereign even appear before the public except at certain distant intervals, and then only for the inspection of state affairs. In their opinion, the kings lose their dignity and bring contempt on their privileges if the public gazes at them frequently. Government is only maintained by good feeling and by respect for various dignitaries of the state.
Elsewhere he writes,
Royalty is limited to the descendants of one family and never goes to another. The same is the case with the families of the wazirs, qazis, and other high officers. They are all hereditary and never changed or altered.
In the last year of his life, Masoodi embarked upon a new work which he called Kitab al-Tanbih wa al-Ishraf, or the Book of Notification and Verification, in which he summarized, corrected, and brought up to date the contents of his former writings, especially the 3 historical works. Masoodi's description of India opens a new vista before us to see our country through the foreign eye. To close his story, let me quote his own self-denying words.
The author of this book compares himself to a man who, having found pearls of all kinds and of all colors scattered here and there, gathers them together into a necklace and makes them a precious ornament of great price, which his possessor guards with care.
Masoodi's precious necklace of wisdom is indeed an invaluable gift to all of us who pride ourselves in the glorious history of this great country, India.
In our program Travelogue, you were listening to some of the foreign travelers' account of India and their understanding of Indian culture and civilization. This program came to you from the General Overseas Service of All India Radio.
You are with us on the General Overseas Service of All India Radio. We now bring you today's commentary. Prime Minister Modi calls for human-centric development. It is scripted by Dr. Stuti Banerjee, Strategic Analyst on American Affairs, and read by Kaushik Rai. Prime Minister Narendra Modi developed the keynote address at the 3rd Leadership Summit of the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum, US-ISPF. Prime Minister said the US-ISPF brought together a diverse range of people for the US-India Summit 2020. He commended the work of the US-ISPF in bringing India and the USA closer. Prime Minister said, the theme for this year is a relevant one, navigating new challenges. When the year 2020 began, nobody imagined this is how it would pan out. The global pandemic has impacted everyone. It is testing our resilience, our public health systems, and our economic systems. The theme of the summit was navigating new challenges. Addressing a range of issues from the COVID-19 pandemic to the future, Mr. Modi made it clear that India has the capabilities to face the challenges of the health crisis and the economic situation. The future should be one where there is a spirit of cooperation among everyone. He stated that the global pandemic has impacted all nations and people. It has been a testing time for the economies as well as the healthcare systems. The current situation demands a fresh outlook with a focus on human-centric development. India did the same by scaling up its healthcare facilities in a record time to deal with the pandemic. Prime Minister also said India was amongst the first countries to globally advocate masks and face coverings as a public health measure and also amongst those creating a public campaign about social distancing. He pointed that India, despite being limited by resources, has one of the lowest death rates per million due to COVID-19 and the recovery rate is also steadily rising. India is cooperating with international agencies for a vaccine and is the second largest personal protection equipment PPE kit producer in the world. Apart from the pandemic, India has also dealt with natural calamities such as floods, 2 cyclones and a locust attack. But India has emerged stronger from all such calamities. The focus of the government through the pandemic and other calamities have been to protect the poor. The government is providing support to 800 million people during the pandemic through the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, under which free food grain is being provided. Looking at the future, Prime Minister Modi stated that India, with 65% of its population under the age of 35, is an aspirational nation, a growing nation. The people of India have embarked on one mission, that is to make an Atmanirbhar Bharat, a self-reliant nation that merges the local with the global. The idea is to transform India from a passive market to an active manufacturing hub in the global supply chain. It will ensure that India strengthens its act as a global force multiplier. India has time and again shown that its goal is global good. As an example, Mr. Modi stated that despite local needs, India continued to supply medicines to the world. The Indian government is helping its young people achieve their aspirations through more ease in laws, regulating business and labor, cutting down red tapeism and ensuring reforms in the tax system. India has a predictable and transparent tax system, rule of law and a democratic political system. He called on the United States, the Gulf countries, Australia and European nations to invest in India, pointing that India is full of opportunities in the private and public sector. They cover core economic sectors and social sectors too. India was looking at investments in coals, mining, railways, defense, space and atomic energy. India wants to ramp up its capabilities while protecting its poor and future-proofing its citizens. India is actively working on the world's largest housing program. The renewable energy infrastructure is being expanded. Rail, road and air connectivity is being boosted. All these initiatives are being undertaken using world-class technology and best global practices. The coronavirus pandemic has also shown the world that the decision on developing global supply chains should be based not only on costs but also on trust. Along with affordability of geography, companies are now also looking for reliability. India offers all this along with stability. That was today's commentary. Prime Minister Modi calls for human-centric development. It was scripted by Stuti Banerjee, strategic analyst on American affairs. This came to you from the General Overseas Service of All India Radio.
This broadcast came to you from the digital channel of the General Overseas Service of All India Radio.